I was watching the release of the Fisa Memo released by the White House on Friday, February 2nd, 2018, via The Ben Shapiro Show, live on YouTube. And there are, to begin, two things you need to understand about it. And I'll explain, just as many others are similarly doing and have been doing on their channels. So first of all, people are outraged, and rightly so. Second, they are, however, not surprised that it reveals what it does. Now, do you remember how, in the few days before the memo was released, once President Trump said it had been declassified and would be released, a lot of warnings went out that reading the memo was unpatriotic, that it was near treason, that if it gets out, it would seriously endanger national security. Then when it was released out into the open, the Democrats and their apologists say there's nothing there. It's a nothing burger. So, if it was of no concern, why was there so much concern over its release? It's a contradiction. It's hypocrisy. Of course, that's nothing new for the left, which is part of why so many people are now surprised. But it does bring a lot of very valid and concerning, very troubling questions into the light where the left always fears to tread. So this really revolves around the FISA courts, the United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. These are courts, far higher level than the typical, than the national typical legal courts. These are courts made up of rotating judges who, in secrecy, review requests from prosecutors to wiretap telephones and now other devices of suspected spies and terrorists to conduct searches if deemed necessary. Now, in order for the FBI, that's American Federal Bureau of Investigation, to get a warrant to wiretap one of such suspects, they have to go to the FISA courts and present probable cause. They have to present evidence more than just a suspicion. I mean, they actually have to have legitimate, valid, verifiable evidence that the person in question is at least very likely, there is real reason to believe they are an agent of the opposing nation. Can't just be that they visited once or a few times in their lifetime. Can't be just because they did business with someone. They had a business meeting. This was kind of the question of the Trump Tower meeting. Business deals, business meetings between people in different countries. Not illegal, not spying. It happens all the time. So it can't be just that. It really has to be reasonable evidence that there is actual collusion going on. Now, what this memo shows us is that is not what the FBI in this case brought to the FISA courts. They brought a document known as the Steele dossier, which is a bunch of bullshit made up by this guy named Christopher Steele in Russia, who was paid to gather or to make up a whole bunch of bullshit on Trump. I am going to play a clip of Ben Shapiro's show as the memo was first being released. First it was excerpts released in early afternoon on February 2nd, 2018. This was last Friday. And around 4 o'clock p.m., the entire thing was leaked. But let's begin with this.
To you verbatim, because it's not that long. It's about 4 pages long. So here is what we know. According to Fox News, the memo suggests that the FBI, when it first gathered a FISA warrant on Carter Page was a Trump foreign policy advisor, and he was supposedly colluding with the Russians, right? This was the supposition of the FBI. This is why they went and got a FISA warrant on an American citizen who was a member of the Trump campaign. The question is, what was that warrant based on? When you submit an application to FISA courts, you have to say, here's why we have probable cause to believe that we need a wiretap on this guy. So what did they use for that? Well, according to the memo, the only thing that they used, and the central component that they used, was the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was a piece of bad research compiled by a spy named Christopher Steele, who went over to Russia and talked to probably some paid Russian folks, and it was done on behalf of Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS is an Oppo research firm. Originally, Fusion GPS was hired by the Washington Free Beacon to do Oppo research on Trump. They cut out of that project, but then Fusion GPS shopped around that intel, and Hillary Clinton decided that she was going to fund the Oppo research file. So she funded the Fusion GPS dossier, which was based on research from Christopher Steele, who was getting information from the Russians. That information was then funneled to the FBI, and the FBI, based on that unverified dossier, based on a piece of information they were unwilling to verify, went to the FISA courts. Now, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Fox News is quoting from the memo. They're the only people who have access, is Washington Examiner and Fox News at this point. According to Fox News, Christopher Steele, the guy who compiled the memo, the original dossier that the warrant was based on, admitted his feelings against then-candidate Trump in September of 2016 when he said that Steele was, quote, desperate that President Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. But that's not the only thing that's in the memo. According to the Washington Examiner, Byron York at the Washington Examiner, the Steele dossier formed an essential part of the initial and all three renewal FISA applications against Carter Page. Here is the key point. Andrew McCabe, the deputy FBI director who just resigned, confirmed that no FISA warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. In other words, they used as the centerpiece of getting a warrant on an American citizen who was part of the Trump campaign an Oppo research hit from Hillary Clinton that was non-verified. What's even worse, the political origins of the Steele dossier were known to senior DOJ and FBI officials, but excluded from FISA applications. So by omission, they lied to the court. They went to the FISA court and they said, we have information that all this stuff is happening with regard to Carter Page. But they didn't say, we got this from a Fusion GPS dossier compiled by Hillary Clinton. Because then the court might have said, well, have you checked any of this? Then the court might have thought, well, have you checked any of this? This raises some serious questions, by the way, about the operations of FISA courts if they're not actually doing the research and asking the FBI to verify that the information they're being provided is actually true. If they're just putting things like the Russian P tape, remember, the dossier was filled with a bunch of bad information, like the idea that Trump had gone to Moscow and then hired a hotel. He tried to get the room that Michelle Obama had stayed in, and then hired Russian prostitutes to pee on the bed. You recall this? It was most of this stuff was nonsense, and nearly none of it has been verified. If they were using that unverified information to get a FISA warrant, and the FISA court went along with that without asking any other questions, that has some broader questions about how FISA courts are actually putting out the warrants.
Okay, so Ben Shapiro, near the beginning of that, noted that Fusion GPS had been an Oppo research firm. Oppo means oppositional research. So, few things of very crucial note here. What this all means is that the FBI used as their entire basis for their wiretapping of an American citizen a piece of compiled bullshit. Really. And the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Courts just went along with it, just let it happen. Now this brings up the question that comes next. Is the FISA court, the United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, not asking those applying for wiretapping warrants where their information is coming from? Seems they're not. Over the course of 30 years, the courts only denied 12 applications for warrants for wiretapping for spying on American citizens out of 34,000 that were submitted. So the 33,988 warrants that were granted to wiretap who? And for who? For you? Without you ever knowing? Your family? Your children? This revelation puts nothing past them. And what is their set of standards for denying an application? If it goes against their interests? These are questions that need to be asked. The people throughout human history who did not ask these questions of their government ended up oftentimes being killed by their government. And we've clearly seen throughout this past, year and a month, actually longer than that, for quite some time actually, that the Democrats have no restraint in their grab for power. Now, all this wiretapping would have been happening during the 2016 presidential campaign. The FBI and the Department of Justice at the time reported to and answered to President Barack Obama at the time. He and Hillary Clinton very much teamed up against the Trump campaign during the 2016 presidential campaign run. All their supporters as well, with Barack Obama effectively calling black voters traitors to their race if they did not vote Democrat. Hillary did the same with women voters, both completely disregarding that the people, they as individuals, might have some of their own viewpoints. All pretty typical leftist bullying tactics. So that they would arrange, encourage, and fund an operation like this? Not difficult to believe.